Welcome to the latest edition of the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. It's USC Purdue Postgame Live here on a Sunday evening, late afternoon in Los Angeles. We come at you every Sunday, 5 p.m. in the West, 8 p.m. in the East, giving you day after coverage of USC football for every game during this 2025 season. And folks, you'll see, whoa, there are three faces on the screen, not two. So Matt Zemek with Ethan Inman, but we have a new guest, Crash Collier. Some USC fans might know him, but Crash, let me allow you to introduce yourself to our audience here at the Voice of College Football.
Matt, Ethan, I'm super excited to be joining you guys here tonight on the Voice of College Football. I'm Crash Collier. A lot of fans may know me as Crashlit. I'm the guy who always wears the caution tape at USC games. I've got my own podcast, Behind the Caution Tape, that airs every Monday. And I'm also involved with We Are SC, helping with a weekly recruiting show for them. And in addition, also worked with USC Athletics and USC Annenberg Media with coverage of all things USC Athletics.
So we're thrilled to have you aboard, Crash, and consider this a crash course in USC football, and we take the temperature of the Trojans after their win over Purdue. We're going to dive into all the specific topics, the very detailed nuances of this game, but first, the 40,000-foot view, the big picture. Ethan, you go first, and then we'll turn it over to Crash.
Sure. I think that this is going to be a really polarizing game for USC fans, so I just want to kind of get all the big stuff out of the way first. I thought that this was the best defensive performance of the season. I know that there's still a lot of struggles in the secondary. There's a lot to be concerned about there, and don't get me wrong, I'm still monitoring that very much. But I really thought that the defensive line came through. I really liked Danton Lynn's defensive play calling as well. And I also thought that the linebackers played a lot better. You know, they were moving east-west a lot better, just kind of blowing up the screen passes that Purdue was trying to do. And I also just thought generally the run defense was pretty solid overall. You know, when Purdue was moving the ball, it was really only mostly through the passing game. So just kind of overall felt a lot better about the defense and felt like they improved from previous weeks, and just generally feel better about how Danton Lynn's adjusting and, you know, the potential of this defense going forward. Still a lot of concerns in the secondary, like I said, but if our defensive line can really dominate, it may not matter quite as much. On the offensive side of the ball, you know, took a little bit of a hit from scoring 60 and 70 points the first 2 weeks, obviously, but still was very impressed with the receivers and with Mayava. He still looked very calm and collected and just generally, you know, in control of the offense. You know, didn't end up throwing any touchdowns, which, you know, is just kind of a thing in the stat sheet, not a super huge deal. You know, if we're like monitoring Mayava's Heisman chances, maybe that matters. But in terms of winning USC football games, not a huge deal. And then the running backs, probably their worst performance of the season. But again, that's like not saying much because the running backs have been really incredible. I thought Wayman Jordan got off to a little bit of a slow start, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Special teams was kind of interesting. I thought Ryan Sayuri did really well, and I'm sure we'll get into that a bit more later as well. And, you know, USC is not being super aggressive in the return game, so there's not much to say about that. But, I mean, great to see a win. You know, we shouldn't take any of these Big Ten wins for granted after last year. And, you know, great to see USC stay locked in after the delay and all that. And, yeah, I'm going to be the one to defend the defense after this one. I really thought that this was their best game.
All right, Crash, your overview of last night's game.
So I thought overall I was really impressed with it. And the big thing I took away is I think this Purdue team was, better than probably any of us thought it would be. I think Barry Odom, even though despite the loss, I think this Purdue team could turn out to be pretty good this year. And definitely a lot more. And I mean, they've already doubled their win total from last year, so it's not saying much. But I think they could maybe even make a bowl. Maybe that's a hot take on there. So I thought overall, it was a good test, especially going on the road, having a real true road game outside of California and being able to take care of business, especially after the 3-hour, 15-minute delay that the Trojans had to endure. But overall, I thought really the offense was super impressive. I think really there's just a lot there. I think obviously, like I said, they're playing a tougher team. So obviously the numbers weren't going to be as impressive. But I still was impressed with Jade Mayava. Obviously, receivers have been good. And then obviously I'm still pretty high on the running back room because of just how well they've been playing, even though this game wasn't as tough. But I still like just how both Wayman Jordan, especially Wayman Jordan, has been doing. It's been really fun to watch him out there. Now on the defensive side, like you said, Ethan, I think there are some concerns, like you said, as we get kind of into the secondary. But I think definitely those can still be cleaned up, especially as the season goes on. And now that USC knows kind of got their first taste of Big Ten play, they'll have time to adjust to it and just learn like, okay, this is what it's going to take to take down a Big Ten offense. And then especially I was really impressed with especially the defensive line. And then really probably my favorite play of the game to watch was seeing Jamal Jarrett get that pick 6, which I think was just super cool for him, especially a guy like that who probably doesn't get to have that sort of, moment. Just the fact that he got it and just the way the whole bench just erupted in celebration, I thought was so cool. So I'm super happy for him.
All right, so we're going to dive into the various angles on this game. We're going to just slice it up from many different angles. But the way the three of us, and now being a 3-man booth as opposed to 2, I'm going to be the traffic cop here, and I'm going to let Ethan and Crash go at it. They might be crashing in some sense, conflicting opinions. That makes for good television here at the Voice of College Football. But we wanted to kind of just get a sense of where Ethan and Crash stood on a number of topics. So the topic in our pre-show meeting or strategy session was the running backs. So let's dive in a little bit more on the running backs. Ethan, your impression of the running backs and what you saw against Purdue.
Sure. I think I was not excited about how the game started from a running back's perspective. I thought that Wayman Jordan was being a little too hesitant, and I think that it's really possible that his nerves kind of got to him a little bit, because we have to remember Wayman Jordan's coming from JUCO, so playing Missouri State is one thing, playing Purdue is another. First big road game, probably the first time he's played in front of that many fans. First time he's had to play against a defense that physical. So I thought that he was a little hesitant and a little nervous. Don't really think that there's too much of a concern for Wayman Jordan in the future. I'm not too worried about him. I still think he's going to be a really big part of this offense, but there is something I think to worry about with him now, whereas early season reviews were all very positive. The one thing that I'm going to keep monitoring with him is now it's very clear that his mentality affects his play a little bit, because I really thought he was playing a little nervous in the beginning. And then, after the USC offense settled in, after he settled in, he was playing a lot better. So, come some of these bigger Big Ten games, if he gets into a bit of a rut and, the opposing defense is really stopping him, I'm a little concerned that, that's going to affect his decisiveness, because, he was a patient runner in the first couple of weeks, but I think that was partially because he was playing against an inferior defense. You can be a little bit more patient. And I just really thought that he was hesitating a little too much in the beginning of the game. And I think Jeff said it somewhere up earlier in the chat. Thanks, Jeff, for being here as always. I thought that Eli Sanders was the better back last night. And there he is. And then I think that there was another comment from Jeff a little bit. Eli was the better back last night. There it is. Yeah, I kind of agree. I thought that, he was getting more yards per carry. He looked a lot faster. He looked a lot more decisive. He looked like a guy who belonged at the Big Ten level a little bit more. And I think that Lincoln Riley probably should have leaned on him a little bit more in this game. And I think that that's kind of a sign for future games, because Wayman Jordan's obviously the more physical back, and, you want his physicality against Big Ten teams. But I think for me right now, I probably trust Eli Sanders to get me 5 or 6 yards in any given game more than I do Wayman Jordan. And that's kind of interesting because, Eli Sanders is not as big. He's kind of the speedier back. He profiles as more of the Lincoln Riley back. So I think we were a lot more excited to see Wayman Jordan in this offense, just because, bringing the more physical runner into the offense was kind of a new dynamic for Lincoln Riley. But I don't know. I think right now, if game on the line, I need somebody to go get 5 yards and a first down, I'm trusting Eli Sanders over Wayman Jordan.
Hey, Crash.
So overall, I was still impressed with, the running back room. Obviously wasn't quite as as solid a performance as we saw the first two games. I mean, to be expected, like I said earlier. But overall, I do think, yeah, Wayman Jordan did start a little slow, like you said. But I still think he's the better back. I still think they should use him more. That said, though, I'm not opposed that if you sense that you sense that Eli's having the better day, maybe you go with him more. And I feel like sometimes that can be something you see Lincoln Riley a little stuck on. He sometimes leans on one guy too much and sticks with him and doesn't even realize that that maybe the other guy is the guy tonight. Sometimes, but I'm still thinking you definitely try to use both, especially with their different skill sets and how Wayman's more powerful. And like you said, Ethan, Eli is more of the, kind of typical Lincoln Riley running back you think of. So I think it's a good way to use them both. I would lean on Wayman more, but that said, I'm not opposed to pivoting to Sanders if you think that he is having the better game. And I hope that's something that I think could really help this team, especially if they're trying to have a more dynamic run game.
All right, before we continue our conversation, want to highlight Jeff Rodriguez, $10 super chat. Jeff, you're the best. You're one of our most loyal watchers, listeners, followers. Thank you for that. And we remind you, if you want, you're going to get a full hour of Ethan, Crash, and myself. But if you want a second hour, $150 in super chats will get you that. So that's the goal. And once again, we don't want one person dropping a C note, though we'll gladly take it. Just like 10 people giving, $10, $11, 15 people giving $8. We want the wealth to be spread around, quite literally, not any one person. So $150 gets you a second hour, and if you want a third hour, we'll be here if we get those contributions coming in. But Jeff Rodriguez gets us off to a great start with the $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Jeff, as always, here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. All right, so the other position group that in our pre-show discussion elicited different opinions, linebackers. And to me, we've been talking a lot about the defensive line, and of course, we're going to get to that. And we've also been talking a lot about the secondary, and we'll get to that too. But the linebackers have kind of been overlooked, and so it's interesting that Ethan, Crash, you have different perceptions of that group. Crash, why don't you start off with your view of the linebackers against Purdue?
So I thought the linebackers, it was definitely a bit of a, not quite as good as we've seen, but I still think overall that I think it can be a good unit. I mean, especially when you have a guy like Eric Gentry, but I still think it can definitely be one that was definitely a tougher game. I think, like we were talking about, definitely so far of the three games, this is a small sample of the teams they've faced. I think, Purdue being the best offense they've faced so far, obviously to be expected that they were going to have maybe a bit of a drop off, but I still think definitely there were some areas as you got, like we said, kind of deeper into the, down the field with the defense that it's like there kind of seem to be more issues. So I think kind of the linebackers, I think they have a lot of potential, but I think there's just a lot of work they still got to do that I'm still got a lot of confidence in them, especially with, just Dantzlin overseeing the whole defense and Rob Ryan just being in there and just what he's been able to do in the time that he's been at USC so far. But I still think there's definitely some areas where they can just improve, especially with some of those, like if they, continue to let, sometimes when they give up big plays, I think it's not too worrisome, but I think it could lead to potential concerns down the road once USC starts playing better teams. Probably not Michigan State, but especially come Illinois, come Michigan, come Notre Dame. I think that could start to, maybe get a little worrisome.
Ethan.
So, Crash, I love you. I love having you on the show, but I got to disagree with you on the linebacker drop-off. I think that this was a big step up for the linebacker room, and there's still some concerns that I have. I think that I'm a little bit concerned with Desmond Stevens, especially with a lot of the missed tackles that he made in this game. I will give him a lot of credit, though, for being in the right spot a lot, so big props to him for that. But I think first and foremost, any discussion about the linebacker room in this game has to start with Eric Gentry because he was easily the defensive MVP. I get that Bishop Fitzgerald had the 2 sacks. I get that, the defensive line was really wreaking havoc. But, I mean, Eric Gentry led the team in tackles with 8, including – and all of them were solo tackles. And then he also had 3 tackles for loss, including 2 sacks. So he was just being super, super disruptive. He was one of the most disruptive guys in the pass rush, despite being a linebacker. And then, was also just all over the field making all the tackles. So it really felt like this was a return to his best form for him. So, love to see that. Love to see him coming alive and, kind of settling into this Rob Ryan, Danton Lynn, especially because he missed so much of last year. So great to see him at his best. And like I said, I think Desmond Stevens was in the right spot a lot. And I am also super in agreement with Jeff here. I love Jaden Walker. He made a huge tackle for loss. I think he has a lot of potential. He makes a lot of great decisions. He's really speedy. And so I think moving him to the Mike linebacker is a really good idea. Me and Jeff are in agreement on this one. And I just think, like, overall, they were getting to the edge a lot better. Purdue wasn't really getting anything going in the short screen game. Like, it felt like there was a guy there. Again, Desmond Stevens was in the right spot a lot. He just needed to finish a couple of those tackles, which I would much rather have him need to improve a bit on his tackling, but be in the right spot than be in totally the wrong spot. So I think that that's improvement for him, even though he hasn't had the best start to the season. And yeah, I just think overall, like, very consistently, they weren't letting Purdue get outside. Again, the run game, they were a big part of keeping that, at bay. Devin Mockabee didn't really get anything going. So especially compared to past games where Desmond Stevens really struggled and Eric Gentry wasn't, playing at his full potential, I think, because he was still settling in a bit more and they were doing a lot of rotations. Like, this felt like a big step up for the linebacker group for me.
All right. So the next position group we want to highlight, where there was, again, a little bit of, not unanimity, but, different angles expressed by Ethan and Crash, is the secondary. And before I ask you for your overviews of the secondary, let me add this layer to the conversation. How much do you think the linebackers need to be supporting the secondary in pass coverage? How much do you see the linebackers in the secondary in terms of how they help each other on the field? I'd be interested in that. But anyway, your overviews of the secondary. First Ethan and then Crash.
Just another really tough game for the secondary. I'm especially concerned with the cornerback room. I just really feel like I'm not seeing anything from them. The more that the games continue to go on, the more that I love Jeff's take that we need to move Kamari Ramsey back. I don't really think he's impacting the game, especially like seeing the sheer difference of Eric Gentry's impact on the game versus Kamari Ramsey's impact on the game, and thinking about the impact he had on the game last year, like not looking great for him. But I think the reason why he's at nickel is because, like, the corner room is just so poor and they've played so poor. Because the safeties seem slightly better. Like, I don't really feel like Bishop Fitzgerald is opportunistic, so at least you have him there. He's had the 3 interceptions. So, like, at least you have kind of a player there who's not going to make, terrible, grievous mistakes and will take advantage of the offense's grievous mistakes. But the cornerback room has just kind of been a non-factor. And, like, Purdue was, like, the Purdue quarterback had heat. Ryan Brown had heat on him all game long from the USC defensive line. But, like, Purdue and Barry Odom were able to really counter that really easily by just getting the ball out quickly. Like, the USC corners, it felt like couldn't even cover the receivers for like 2 seconds. Like, we just need them to cover the receivers for 2 seconds so that, those quick throws aren't an option. Like, it was really frustrating. So I'm still really, really concerned with the secondary. I think it's a problem that we can avoid based on Danton Lynn's play calling, and if we take advantage of just our strengths. So honestly, from my point of view, I think I'm leaning towards the linebackers supporting the rush more than supporting the secondary, just because I think when we were succeeding in this game, it was because we were playing to our strengths. And that's kind of what I liked about Danton Lynn's play calling is, he didn't rely on a secondary that he's seen struggle through these first few games. I feel like he really was like, the secondary is the secondary, but like we have a really good defensive line and they've proven that. And, the linebackers have the potential, like Eric Gentry did, to impact the pass rush. So I think continuing to do that, I mean, unless it gets really, really poor, I'd rather see them, focusing on stopping the run, impacting the pass rush, and like I said, getting east to west on some of those screen passes, because that was where they were most effective in this game.
So Ethan, I think your concerns are completely valid and warranted, but I think that definitely it is something that can be improved. I think you definitely saw I think it was just obviously there were some bad plays, especially when Purdue just opted to throw deep, but I think those can be cleaned up. And I think part of it is it's Purdue has a pretty good offense, and I think that was definitely tough, adjusting. It's on the road, tough environment. Obviously, you had the rain delay, so a lot of factors in there. That I'm not trying to dismiss that, and use those as excuses, but I still think definitely it did, factor in. But I still think they can get better. I think it's just like you said, though. I think they should, put Kamari back where he was, and just really have the players play to their strengths. And I think that's something they're just going to have to go back and work on. But I'm still really confident in it, because I think that I'm not saying it's like I said, I'm not saying it's I'm not saying I'm happy with it. I'm just saying I think it can improve. But I think it's definitely one of those tough things where you're playing a Big Ten opponent for the first time. You're trying to be put everywhere. You're trying to put people. I think it's like Jeff's saying. Why does he have to be nickel? You should be putting him. You should be putting him in the spot he plays best, I think. So I think it should be looking at maybe where can you position guys to where, they would best help the team so much. And I think in Kamari's case, if you don't put him in nickel, maybe that would help, I think, in one way. So I think that's something that definitely USC and Danton Lynn should be looking at in practice this week.
All right. Lots of things I think that are worth diving into a little bit deeper with the secondary, and perhaps, that this also relates to the linebackers in terms of how they provide pass coverage in particular. I mean, run support could also be relevant, but especially I think pass coverage, given what Ethan said about Purdue's quick passing game. The USC pass rush was getting home, so Purdue said, well, we got to get rid of the ball quickly, and it moved the ball with that quick passing game. So kind of dovetailing with what Jeff is saying here about, does the best player have in the back line of defense have to be nickel? Why? And that is all about, shifting Kamari Ramsey to a more natural position. It brings up the question. I want to Crash first on this, then Ethan. Are the problems in the USC secondary more about the players not being in the right positions? Danton Lynn not putting the right chess pieces in the right spots on the chessboard? Or is this about players just not making plays, not making the right reactions? Crash, then Ethan.
I think it could be a bit of both. I think we're seeing maybe guys might not be in the right spots, and might not be playing at where they could be at their where they have they can be at their full best, have their most potential to contribute to the play. But I think at the same time it could just be the play calling too, and what's being called. So I think it's definitely a bit of both. So I think for that reason it's something that I think you really got to look at and just see, are the right guys where they are, or is it the play calling? I think it could be a bit of both. And I think I'd like to see maybe another game or two, and ideally against maybe at least through the Illinois game, before I really kind of, see if I can really lean one way or the other, see if it's the right guys or is it the plays being called.
I think it's on the players, to be honest. I think, like I said, I really feel like Danton Lynn is doing his best with what he has. And I'm seeing Jeff's comments in the chat about, he's giving them soft coverage on purpose, barely ever play man, way too much space. I think that's because he's worried about giving up big plays. And I think that's one thing that you can say that the secondary played a part in this game, was not giving up home run pass plays. And I think that's the biggest reason why, is because I feel like Danton Lynn is kind of playing bend don't break in the secondary. And that's not necessarily because, it's a bad choice by Danton Lynn. I think it's because it's the only option. I just really haven't been impressed with the secondary's play at all, and especially the corners, like I said. They've had a few good moments, obviously, like Bishop Fitzgerald has been really opportunistic, which is great to see. But as a unit, and this, again, we have to talk about the injuries because the injuries matter. I think that they're really missing Prophet Brown, and I've said that week in and week out. I also think that they're probably missing Alex Graham because Dan Lynn said that he was working with the one. So both of those players coming back, if they're able to come back at some point this season, I think will help. But yeah, I just think that the current group of players that they have now is not working, and I think Dan Lynn knows that. So I think he's really doing the best with what he has.
All right, in terms of diving a little deeper with the secondary, and even you highlighted Jeff's comment about Danton Lynn playing soft coverage seemingly on purpose. Ethan, and then of course I'll let Crash get a crack at it. Do you think Danton Lynn's just being intentionally vanilla so that Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame don't get to see anything too exotic? You think he's just kind of playing the long game and lining things up?
Probably not. Because I think even if you played vanilla and you had a good secondary, the secondary would have dominated Missouri State and Georgia Southern. Like we have to remember, like Georgia Southern put up a 20 spot on this defense. Like I really don't, and that's Georgia Southern. And then we played Missouri State, which is like a, kind of barely an FBS team. They did play good against SMU. I have to give them credit. I think that they're a program on the rise, especially considering it being their first year in the FBS. They're doing really well. But yeah, to me, it's even if you're playing vanilla coverage, you're going to dominate those teams if your secondary is good. So I think he's just making the best of what he has, like I said.
I agree with Ethan on that. That said, though, is it possible that maybe there's one or two things that we might not see, especially against these more tougher defenses? Although I think for the most part, I don't think he's high. I don't think he's playing vanilla because it's like Ethan said. Like if he was doing that, there wouldn't be these big busted plays that we've seen the last couple of weeks. So I agree with Ethan for the most part. That said, I think there may be something, maybe a play or two or something we haven't seen yet. But I don't think he's playing vanilla.
Well, it's worth parsing that
Absolutely.
He was sending safety blitzes in the first quarter, and something that Ethan and I were talking about: attack early, don't sit back. But he's doing that, primarily with the defensive line. But he will throw in a safety blitz every now and then. But obviously, play after play after play, you do need your secondary to hold up a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see how that room gets developed, and it's going to be interesting to see, with the injuries, USC's working with a shorthanded secondary room. If players get healthy, and if you get a deeper, fuller rotation of players, is that the thing that will create a more harmonic, cohesive secondary unit? It's going to be interesting to see as we go into Michigan State and then right around the bend to Illinois. One more question about the secondary. Reactions on balls, just tracking balls. To me, that was a real problem. There was the double lateral, which, Eric Gentry did read, but no one else going there to get the ball. And then two other plays that really more specifically highlight the secondary. There was a 3rd and 9 for Purdue in the late third quarter, and a 4-yard out pattern. So should have been tackled near the sideline, left sideline, 5 yards short of the sticks. But you see the USC defender going for the interception. Not going to the body, but trying to knock down the ball. That is football 101. Just tackle the man 4 or 5 yards short and get a 4th and medium. Didn't do that. That's a basic failure. And then Ryan Brown of Purdue threw another floater later in the game, in the fourth quarter, over the middle of the field, and you could just see the USC secondary running to where the ball was initially thrown and not taking the angle to where the receiver was going to be. Just a big misread of where that play and where the Purdue receiver was going. So, I put me on the side of it's more the players. I'm not seeing sharp reactions to the ball. I'm not seeing the polished, reflexive kind of instincts that, forget about football. Any world-class athlete, any sport needs. This thing needs to be intuitive. You can't be thinking it through, because then you're slow-footed, you're caught, you're dead. Whatever you need to do, you're going to fail. So to me, it seems like it's more a player issue than a coaching issue. This is not to say that the coaches don't have a role in this. With like Kamari Ramsey, I think being the main thing that is worth questioning from Danton Lynn's point of view. But your opinions, guys, on tracking the ball and just how members of the secondary are reacting to plays. I am not very pleased with what I'm seeing thus far. Ethan first, Crash second.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, Matt. I'm just not. I think, if I recall correctly, the play you're talking about on the 4-yard out route, I believe that was Desmond Stevens. And so he's a linebacker. And like I said, I felt like he was in the right position for most of the game. He's had some tackling issues, obviously. But there's also tackling issues throughout the secondary, so it's not just a him issue. But yeah, the Eric Gentry play, I mean, you can't really hold it against him just because of the game he had. But, any other player makes that play, we're probably coming down a little bit harder on him. So I honestly think on that play, because I watched the replay several times, because Gentry's not the kind of guy who gives up on plays like that. So I was wondering what happened. If he just didn't know the rule. And I really honestly feel like he just didn't know where the ball went, because he goes up and it hits his hands, and then he kind of looks around like this, like he doesn't know where the ball is. And then he turns around and there's maybe a quarter of a second where if he could have made a quicker decision to go to the quarterback. But Ryan Brown, give credit to him for really knowing what was going on, because he took off immediately. And I feel like, Eric Gentry still being in that confused state that he was in, you can't really blame him for being a quarter of a second or a half second too late on that one. But yeah, I mean, going back to the secondary in terms of the corners and the safeties, it's just not, other than really opportunistic plays, mostly by Bishop Fitzgerald, it's been a lot of kind of playing on their heels, a lot of waiting for the play to develop in front of them, not really reading plays super well. So that's definitely a concern of mine that I'm kind of aligned with you there on. I definitely agree.
Okay, before I turn it over to Crash, just want to mention on that the Eric Gentry double lateral touchdown for Purdue. The teaching lesson here is that if there's a cross-field pass and you're not sure if it's a lateral, we teach offensive players, bat the ball down so that there's no interception. For defensive players, if you're not sure if it's a lateral, bat the ball down the field so that if it is a lateral, there's going to be a loss of 10, 15, 20 yards. That's the teaching lesson to Eric Gentry on that play. Not only knock the ball down, but knock it backward. Make sure that you're getting a loss of yardage if, you don't know if it's a lateral, but if it is, just your technique or in terms of reading the situation and what it needs, you're batting the ball down the field so that Purdue, if Ryan Brown picks the ball up, it's going to be 15 yards in the backfield, not at the line of scrimmage, and he can just run up that short left sideline for a touchdown. Okay, Crash, your take on this particular issue with the ball tracking.
I think the ball tracking is an issue. I agree with both of you, Matt and Ethan. I agree with both of you 100% on that. I think there definitely were some issues, like you were saying, Ethan. I thought you gave some great examples of just how it's just you got to be instant on it. And it's like you were saying, if you're just slow, if you just think too much, you're gonna pay for it by thinking you're gonna you're gonna basically lose. There are times where it's you just got to go for it, and there are times where you sometimes maybe wait, but a lot of these ones you just got to go for it, I think. So that's why I agree. And on that lateral, it's definitely something that that just can't happen. Anytime there's scoring on a lateral play, I'm just oh my gosh. I can't believe they're even trying this. So if they score on that, it's what happened? So it's just it's just really frustrating to see. So it's definitely something that I think does need to be improved upon in the coming weeks.
All right. continuing along with our position group focus, because we wanted to hit on the things that Ethan and Crash had especially strong opinions about, but now let's continue. And so let's continue with the defensive line. I think everyone who follows USC would agree this is the strength of the defense right now. I think the operative question, the relevant question is, this defensive line is eating in terms of the pass rush. How concerned are you with the defensive line in terms of run stuffing? Because the pass rush, that was an elite pass rush we saw against Purdue. But where do you see this defensive line in terms of its run stuffing capability, which, if it can improve, would make this good defensive line even better? Crash first, Ethan second.
I think this defensive line overall, I've been really impressed with it. And obviously, I think the pass defense has been really good. But I do think that obviously the run game does need to be better. I think we definitely saw some times where it was, they let things through, but I think overall it's been impressive. But I think it's like you're saying, Matt, if they can just improve on this run game, the run game can improve, it will just make them so much better and just one of the best defenses. And I think it's like you said with the comment that Jeff just said, D-line's great, they've improved. And yeah, but I think it's definitely something they do need to improve on with the run game and just not let those running backs through. And it's something they need to take care of instantly. And I think they got a good opportunity to take care of that this week, or just improve on it this week. But it's something that does need to improve. And I think Eric Henderson will need to do, like Jeff is saying, doing a better job of making sure that they're ready for it, especially when one of his jobs, in addition, is being the run game coordinator.
So I think that this was the best run defense performance of the season, and I think the defensive line is the biggest reason why. I thought that it was like night and day compared to Georgia Southern. I mean, Georgia Southern, it felt like, was getting anything that they wanted against USC in the run game, which really surprising considering they're Georgia Southern. But I was a lot more concerned about the run defense after that game, especially the way that Georgia Southern was just able to dominate the time of possession in that game. This game, it felt completely different. I actually thought the run defense was very solid, and I think it's especially encouraging that the defensive line was being disruptive in the backfield, not just on pass plays, but on run plays. They were, there was several tackles for loss on run plays that I can remember, and even on, plays where they weren't disrupting, or collapsing the pocket or getting in the backfield. Maccabee was still only getting like 4 or 5 yards. And I think that again, has a little bit to do with the defensive line and the linebackers working in cohesion for sure, but just really, really impressed overall with the improvement game to game, especially because, this was supposed to be a game, where the difficulty increases. So to see them kind of rise to the occasion, play better against a bigger line, and, D1 Big Ten players, and play better. I am like, it's a world of difference, my confidence in the run defense this week compared to last week.
All right, we are going to get to Jaden Mayava and the rest of the offense. Don't you worry. But one more thing to kind of tie things together with this defense in terms of an overview, gentlemen, and that is just how good was the offense USC's defense saw on Saturday. I'm really interested in your opinions here because, Purdue was not a tomato can. And, Ethan and I on previous editions of the show, we came to the conclusion, we agreed on this, that, preseason I might have thought that Purdue was a tomato can, but going into this game week, last week, I thought, Purdue's a lot better than I expected. And I think that view generally did hold up. But Purdue being better than expected, let's calibrate our opinions very carefully here. Purdue was 1-11 last year. So the bar was really low. So when I say Purdue was better than I expected, that doesn't mean I thought Purdue was a, really good team, really special team, just better than 1-11. This might be a 4 or 5 win Purdue team, but maybe you guys think Purdue could make a bowl game. Jeff Rodriguez in the chat said he thinks Purdue is a bowl quality team. I'm not entirely sure of that, because Ryan Brown made a number of decent plays, but he threw some really bad interceptions, and I think that might be a question I need the two of you to look at in conjunction with this discussion of how good was this Purdue offense, truthfully, because in my mind, when USC goes up against better offenses with better quarterbacks, could get a little bit uglier than what we saw here. That Ryan Brown's interceptions, both he threw the tip. There was the tipped interception that became the Ja Jarrett thick six to put the game away. But two other interceptions inside the 5, and those were just bad throws. Those were telegraphed. The receivers were not open. If a better quarterback is in there, those drives become points, maybe not touchdowns, but points, and this game is closer at the end. So when we calibrate just how good USC's defense was, we also have to adjust for the caliber of the opposition. So with all of that in mind, Ethan, then Crash, your opinions of just how good this Purdue offense was, and kind of getting a sense of, if we face better quarterbacks, do you think the defense still got this, or not necessarily?
So I want to be very clear. I think Purdue, talent-wise and coaching-wise, is a bowl caliber team. I don't think they're going to make a bowl because their schedule is just ridiculous. They have to go next week and play Notre Dame, next week and play Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is starving for a win. So I really don't see Purdue winning that one. They play Illinois, again, not a game that I can see them winning. Minnesota, they could win, but again, it's going to be a tough one, especially in Minnesota. That's a tough environment to win in, as we saw with USC last year. They get a bit of a break when they play Northwestern and Rutgers, especially Rutgers at home. I think that those are potential wins there. But then they have to play Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, Indiana, and I don't see them winning any of those. So if my predictions go as I said, that's a 4-win team. I could see them getting 5 and upsetting one of these teams, especially one of the lower end ranked teams that I said. Maybe Washington, because I don't think Washington's going to be ranked. But again, I do think that this program is on an upward trajectory. I thought that Barry Odom's coaching adjustments were really good. I actually kind of like what I saw from Ryan Brown potential-wise. I think that he was relatively mobile, which I think makes it even more impressive that USC's defensive line was able to get to him. And he has a pretty good arm. So I think, and he's spent the spring learning under Coach Belichick, so I think that benefited him a little bit. I do think that he has the potential to be a good quarterback in the Big Ten, and I think Purdue's trending in the right direction. Don't think that they're making a bowl this year because the schedule is just ridiculous. And I think something, too, that you have to really keep in mind about Ryan Brown is Ryan Brown made very key mistakes, but overall, he carried this Purdue offense, and the Purdue offense was moving the ball decently well for most of the game. There was 2 turnovers in the red zone that just killed their chances at getting points. And I feel like with a little bit more experience, because he's still a redshirt sophomore, he's decently young, especially, considering his eligibility. And he was on a Purdue team last year that was terrible. And, he's still getting used to Barry Odom, and Barry Odom's still getting used to him. But I do think that they have the right coach and the right quarterback, and I think they're going to improve. And I think he showed some of that potential on Saturday. To be honest, in thinking about USC facing better Big Ten quarterbacks, I don't really know how many of them that there are at this point, just because I haven't really been too impressed with anybody who's played tough competition yet. Raiola seems like same old Raiola. I don't really feel great about the Purdue quarterback, or not the Purdue quarterback, the Penn State quarterback, Drew Aller. I don't really feel great about Drew Aller in big games. I didn't feel like he played that awesome against USC last year. I think Tyler Warren really carried him in that game. And just generally, outside of them, Altmaier, I think, is overhyped. I just don't think it's a very QB-strong conference. So I don't think, we're going to see such a huge difference in QB play. And I think it will get a lot. I really, Iowa's not And, there's nothing going on at Northwestern, obviously. So I'm not too worried about the defense and the defensive line and the linebackers, especially doing worse against better QBs, just because I don't really feel like there's that many out there, to be honest. I think the Bryce Underwood at Michigan still has a long way to go in terms of his development. Like, there's just nobody I've seen that's blowing the doors off for me.
So Ethan, I think honestly, I think this Purdue team, I'm not saying they will, but I think possibly maybe there's an upset or two on that schedule. So could they get to it? I mean, granted, like you said, Matt, this Purdue team definitely looks better. I mean, they already got more wins than last year. I mean, that's not exactly a huge accomplishment, but I think just for just how Barry Odom has come in and just kind of just already just, set the tone, reset the culture, and I think has this program, as I think all can agree, just trending in the right direction. So I think he's going to do a good job, and I think they got a shot at it. I think it's not going to be easy for them, especially looking at the schedule, like you said, Ethan, but I think they got a shot. That's all I'm going to say on that. But I think definitely going back to, is this offense good? I think it's better than it was, and I think it could be good. Obviously, there's still, hard to say, and I think maybe USC does face some better quarterbacks. Like, I do think I've seen a bit. I haven't gotten to see Bryce Underwood play, but I've seen Luke Altmaier. Been impressed with him. I think Drew Aller. I think when USC played Penn State, he hasn't been good, but I've definitely been impressed with him. And I think he's got a good offensive coordinator in his corner in Andy Kotelnicki. Obviously, the Nittany Lions don't face the Trojans this year. But I think USC could potentially see some interesting quarterbacks. I'm kind of thinking we'll see. Kind of interested to see how Aiden Childs does with Michigan State. Altmaier, as I said. Bryce Underwood, I think I agree with you. I need to see more from him. And granted, he's a freshman. He's facing some tough circumstances too, especially with what his NIL check is. Then Nebraska, I definitely want to see more from Raiola. But Dante Moore, I think, at Oregon, is one that could definitely give USC some tough times, especially with the Trojans having to go to Autzen Stadium. So I think this defense could face some tougher quarterbacks, and I really think that USC will face. I think this defense is good, but I think they need to face some better offenses that I kind of highlighted to see if they're great.
All right, so we've talked a lot about USC's defense the past 25, 30 minutes. Let's now shift it back to the offense. So, we're deep into our show, and we haven't yet talked about Jaden Mayala. So let's talk about him. And before I throw it to you for your opinions, the first thing, and I think this is the big picture thing, you see so much more natural comfort and fluidity at the quarterback position than you saw with Miller Moss last season. Now, Miller Moss had some great games, but, against weak opposition. Like, he was awesome against Rutgers. He was awesome against Wisconsin. But, against better teams, he would hit a wall, he'd wobble, he'd make the big mistake. Mayava, to me, the first 2.5 quarters, excellent. Then he began to lose focus with USC having a lead. And, interestingly enough, like the fourth quarter, USC made some mistakes, got sloppy, kind of brought back those 2024 vibes. So, Mayava did not play a complete game, but the first 2.5 quarters, my goodness, he just looked like a natural, just such a nice hand-in-glove fit at the quarterback position, just really comfortable in a first Big Ten road game, a level of comfort Miller Moss didn't have. Now, people are going to say, wait a minute, Miller Moss's first Big Ten road game was at Michigan. Slight difference from Purdue at Ross-Ade Stadium. But Miller Moss didn't handle a Maryland road trip well. Miller Moss didn't handle a Minnesota road trip well. So for Mayava to come right into Purdue, even though it's just Purdue, that's still mighty impressive for a Big Ten debut. So I give Jaden Mayava very high marks. Ethan, Crash, your impressions.
I give Mayava pretty high marks as well. I think your point about him starting fast is really on point. Really liked him, as Bob said, getting his legs involved. Thought that not only did he look like a dynamic runner, a runner who's going to keep defenses honest, but he looked like a physical runner too. I mean, he ran over a Purdue defensive back to get the first down on a key. I believe it was a 4th down. So really like to see that as well. I think that just kind of expands their ability to use him in running situations. I think that the physical tools are just all there. Like the run, we mentioned the running. He's tall, he's physical, like I said. He throws the ball with like such little effort. It seems like he came right out of the gate and threw that really nice ball to Jacoby Lane. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football so far. There's obviously it's a long season. There's a long way to go, but I think that says somewhat a little bit about the guys who are supposed to be at the top and not performing up to par. Like Arch Manning is, I mean, I don't even have to say anything. I just mentioned the name Arch Manning and you all know what I'm talking about. Just awful, awful, awful against UTSA of all teams. So and a lot of other quarterbacks I think are in that same boat. Like I said, Big Ten's not a very strong quarterback league. I'm just really grateful to have Mailava. I'm really grateful that Lincoln Riley made that switch last year. And I'll admit, I was a little bit skeptical. I thought that, Moss's bad play was a little overblown. And I, thought that Mailava was making some really key mistakes there at the end. But all credit to Lincoln Riley for really developing him and instilling a lot of confidence in him. And man, he just has a lot of physical traits that I really like. And the confidence just week in and week out is, something to really, really be excited about. And I feel like even when he made some of those mistakes at the end of the game, it didn't feel like his confidence wavered too much. Like he still settled back in. He was still leading the USC offense down the field. Let's remember that Ryan Sayuri missed a field goal that would have made this 36-17. Like they were still scoring points at a consistent basis. They didn't punt in this game at all. So, the offense was still a well-oiled machine with him at the helm. Do I think he's going to have better games? Absolutely. Him not throwing for any touchdowns is a big indicator there. But in terms of all the intangibles, in terms of the things that don't show up in the stat sheet, in terms of actually watching Jaden Mailava play football, really loving what I'm seeing.
So I've been kind of high on Jaden Mailava ever since I saw him in that spring game when he first got to USC. I was thinking, oh great, here comes Miller Moss. He had the great Holiday Bowl performance. He's going to be the guy, right? Kind of the same hype everyone was going off of. I see Mailava and I'm like, shoot, I think this guy's better. Obviously, Mailava had to wait his turn, but when he got it, I think for a few reasons, I also thought he was better. And I just think he's just a better fit because he's more of a dual threat quarterback compared to Miller Moss. Miller Moss I think he's a good quarterback, and I'm wishing him nothing but success at Louisville, but he wasn't the right quarterback for the offense that Lincoln Riley runs. So I think that was why I was high on Mailava pretty early on, and so when he got his chances to start, I could get why he'd still be a little nervous and do that. But pretty much when Riley made that switch, it was pretty much you are losing one of those guys. Who do you want next year is pretty much what he had to decide. And pretty much Riley's thinking is, I think I need Mailava. So sorry, Miller, your time's up. But pretty much now that I think Mailava's been in the system for a year, knew he was going to likely be the starter unless Hassan Longstreet just came in and just dominated spring. It was Mailava's team. So pretty much because of that, now that Mailava's going in with his confidence, I think that's why he's going to play so well. And I think there was obviously maybe a little bit of loss of focus, like you were saying, near the end of the game. But I think maybe, and I think maybe that's because he hasn't had to play past 3 quarters yet this year. So I think this is his first complete game he's had to do, just due to the fact that USC was dominating, so it wasn't worth getting him in there. But I think that's something that obviously maybe didn't have a passing touchdown, but still I think he was getting him down the field, maybe a little bit of loss of focus, but I'm still not too worried about that. And I think it'll be something he'll just get more used to as he gets used to, having to play the full game again, starting next week with Michigan State.
Yeah, just talking about Jaden Mailava in a national context, Jeff Rodriguez says he's going to New York. Well, Jeff, if he's going to New York, USC's going to the college football playoff. So we all hope you're right. But, on a national level, think about all the hyped national quarterbacks across the country so far this season. Drew Auer, not very good, although, cupcakes, maybe he's just kind of saving it for Ohio State and the other big games on Penn State's schedule. But nevertheless, Drew Auer has not looked good. Garrett Nussmeier, LSU, not looked good. Like LSU's won its big games because of the defense. LSU has not been scoring 30, 40 points against quality opposition. It's the LSU defense which is doing it all. And LSU beat Florida because DJ Lagway is horrible. DJ Lagway is worse than Arch Manning is, and Arch Manning is, whoo, yeesh. 10 straight incompletions. Was subpar against UTEP. So, Arch Manning is a disaster so far this season. Lenoris Sellers, he's injured, but South Carolina wasn't even playing well on offense when he was healthy. So he's been a bust. So you just go down the line, one by one. So many of the quarterbacks who got so much offseason publicity, they've been busts, or at least at best unremarkable so far this season. So, Jeff, I don't know about Maiava going to New York, but I will say Maiava has a chance. He certainly has a chance to be in the top tier of quarterbacks. And if you're in the top tier of quarterbacks, you definitely have a chance to go to the Downtown Athletic Club in December. It will be fascinating to see how it plays out. All right. We still have more coming to you here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. But first, we need to have a word from our sponsor. We'll see you all in a minute.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select a betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
And we remind you that Mark Rogers can be found here at the Voice of College Football Monday through Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. So be sure to catch Mark Rogers shows 6 days a week here at the Voice of College Football. And while we're talking about the Voice of College Football, we also have to remind you, get these bad boys, these VOCFB hats and other merch. And Ethan, being the dutiful, good teammate that he is, he's continuing to model the USC camo hat with the VOCFB logo. Go to our merch shop, vocfb.com/shop. Every USC piece of merchandise, such as that beautiful USC cap that Ethan has, you buy one of those caps, proceeds support the USC channel, so Ethan, myself, and Crash, the USC channel overall, and the Voice of College Football. And here's one more piece of housekeeping for all of you. Now that we have Crash on board, let's mention this, that, remember last year, Mark Rogers and I would do bonus cuts? Well, bonus cuts are coming back. So Ethan, Crash, and myself, doing bonus segments for you, and that's for memberships. So you can see the layers of involvement there. So the Rose Bowl champion, $3 a month, very affordable. Heisman, $10 a month. National champions, $11, $20 a month. But you get the bonus cuts at the middle Heisman or the national champions top tiers. In terms of membership. So please consider becoming a member here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. We're going to be cranking out some bonus cuts, Crash, Ethan, and myself, giving you extra added value for your membership. So that's another way you can support the channel, is with those memberships. And again, at the middle or top tiers of those three, you get the bonus segments that Ethan, Crash, and myself are going to produce. All right, housekeeping's done. Let's now continue with our conversation. The offensive line. And, Ethan, you said something very instructive at the beginning of our show tonight, that like you can look at this game however you want to. That's such a really accurate and wise observation, because there was a lot of good, but you can still look at a lot of flaws, and it's Purdue. And so you can say this was a lot better than Georgia Southern, which it absolutely was, zero question about that. And you can also say, well, what about when we play Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame, Oregon? So, you can be optimistic about this, you can be pessimistic about this, and you have a perfectly good case to make. You can see the glass is half empty, you can see the glass is half full, and perhaps no unit might embody that more than the offensive line, because they were really good. They controlled this game. Ethan, you reminded everyone that USC did not punt, but then it was Purdue, and USC was settling for field goals, and it bogged down in the red zone, and didn't put the boot on the throat. This was not quite skull crusher. This was very effective, consistent game management from the offensive line, but it wasn't hang a 50 burger and just slash some throats and leave absolutely no doubt. There is room for interpretation. So Ethan, your view of the offensive line?
Yeah, I think my view of the offensive line continues to be the same as last week. Is as long as USC is running what it wants to run, and it seems like they've been able to run everything that they want to run, passing, running the ball, getting the ball out in east-west out in space to the tight ends, running the ball up the middle, protecting Maiyava. And I think Maiyava's been sacked once this entire year, and it was towards the end of the game last night. So I just, I don't really think that there's any reason for concern. You mentioned, not being able to finish drives. Like it's not like I'm kind of rah about this offensive line. Admittedly, I'm not an offensive line expert. I didn't play offensive line or anything like that. So
none of us did.
I'm still learning about, what constitutes as good offensive line play. And I'm still, learning to pay attention to them as well as some of the skill players. But from what I've seen so far, I have no real reason for concern. And I think, as long as they're continuing to produce at the level that they are, then I'm going to continue riding with the offensive line. I think that could change. Like I said, I don't feel like they've been such skull crushers and finished every drive that I'm, 100% confident that they're going to destroy everyone else. But I do think that as of right now, I have no reason for concern.
I think I agree with you, Ethan. There isn't really any reason for concern. That said, though, I do want to see this offense go up against better D-lines. And I think it seems like this O-line's really gelled. And last year, I actually got an opportunity to interview Justin Dietich on my podcast. And that was one thing I talked to him about, was when we talked about the 2023 season, his final year with the Trojans. I was just asking, what was that like just having gel? Because from what I've heard, that's the position that just takes the longest for those guys to build that trust and really just that amount of comfort to where they can play well and execute. So I thought that was just really interesting to hear. And it just brings me back over the years, especially last year with the O-line struggling, but they did get better during the year. No better example is that than Elijah Page, where the coaches stayed patient with him. And even as he struggled, and there were tons of comments over social media, like get him out of there, bench Elijah, Page needs to go, all that. I will give credit to USC for staying patient with him and watching him get better. And I think that's something that, especially with him back and just a guy like Killian O'Connor at center, and as well as the other surrounding pieces, they've just been really, it seems like they're doing really well and just getting more comfortable with each other. And obviously they've had that year, but still, I've been really impressed with it. And I'm looking forward to seeing them take on some better offenses, especially once they, got to face, Illinois, Nebraska, Oregon, Iowa, teams that are especially known for having good defenses.
All right, saving the best for last here at the USC channel at the Voice of College Football, the coaching performances. We get to evaluate Lincoln Riley and Danton Lynn. Gentlemen, your evaluations of Lincoln Riley. And one of the things we talked about before the show was evaluating Lincoln as a play caller specifically, and then separately in terms of his overall management of the team in this situation against Purdue. Ethan first.
Play calling, I'm really high on him. I think that my favorite drive of the game in terms of play calling was the the final drive or one of the final drives, I think it was the last USC drive where they really just leaned on Wayman Jordan to kind of run out most of the rest of the clock. I think Purdue had a minute left when they got it, or a little bit over a minute. Just love to see that, love to see them killing clock, running the ball, not getting too creative. And that's like a real improvement from what we've seen in past years from Lincoln Riley. So play calling generally very good. Just again, throughout the game, like the offense was working, and, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I feel like, again, didn't punt, moved the ball consistently. So felt generally, it wasn't perfect, but I think it's obviously very, very difficult for that to be the case. So overall, just impressed with that. I think slightly, I think I'm higher on a play caller. I'm higher on him as a play caller in this game than overall. Just because I think heading into the game, I was still a little concerned about some of his choices with travel. And then I'm really interested, I think people are talking about it in the chat, but I'm really interested what's going on with the whole Alani Noah, Micah Banuelos situation, just because Banuelos has gotten 2 starts after Alani Noah got the start week 1 and kind of was the best offensive lineman on the team. So I just don't know, what's going on there. Hopefully Alani's okay and figures it out, and hopefully they, work out their differences if there's any differences there. But overall, I think his mindset this year has been good. His play calling has been great. And that last drive especially was a big improvement from what we've seen in previous years with the clock management late, and especially in Big Ten road games.
So I think overall, he's been better in both regards, both as a head coach and overseeing the entire football program, as well as a play caller. And I was a little bit worried about some of his play calling, and was wondering when, after Josh Henson left for Purdue and he made Luke Heward the offensive coordinator in addition to his quarterback duties, what that would look like. And even though he still has held on to the play calling duties, I've been actually more impressed. And my example that I use with the play calling is last week against Georgia Southern, when Wayman Jordan fumbled, Lincoln Riley didn't just completely give up on the run game. We've seen that happen. I think Quentin Joyner had some fumbles, and Riley did acknowledge in his press conferences that, those are crucial. They can't be happening. But instead of, just completely going away, shutting down the run game, kind of more or less completely, he stuck with it. He let Wayman Jordan get back out there and keep running. So I think just having that just creates a more dynamic element, just a more dynamic offense. And I think that's what's helped this offense to thrive so well. And so that reason, I've been really impressed with his play calling. And so far, I've also been impressed with him as a head coach. Obviously, he's coming into this year under a lot of fire, especially because his record coming into this year was worse than Clay Helton's. I think it was about 2 games worse. I think Helton was 28-12 after 40 games. Riley was 26-14. He's 3-0, so he's made that 29-14 now. So I've been impressed with how he's just overseen this program. I think just helped just change the culture, and I think I think got this team to just really, buy in this year. And it seems like the changes might be real this time, especially just how they've been recruiting, and just everything, every facet of the program just really has impressed me from this offseason to now.
I'm going to offer my evaluation of Lincoln Riley. Jeff Rodriguez, straight A. Interesting that Jeff Rodriguez is giving Lincoln Riley a higher grade than I am. I don't think that happens too often. But I would give Lincoln Riley kind of an A-, B+. I'll probably give him an A-. I can lean in that direction. But Jeff, and I'm saying this specifically to Jeff, remember when USC was up 30-17, mid-4th quarter, was around the Purdue 30-yard line? Lincoln Riley threw the ball on 1st and 10 and incomplete, and it led to a 3rd and long situation, incomplete. And that USC failed to run 90 seconds of clock that it could have done if Lincoln Riley had run the ball on that series of downs. And I would say when you're up by 2 scores in the 4th quarter on the road, you should be running the ball 1st and 10, right? Because you lock up 45 seconds off the clock. And then if you want to pass the ball on 2nd and 10, 9, 8, you can to get the 1st down. But you bank those 45 seconds. You take them off the board. That one series of downs bothered me. Also, there was a 3rd or 4th down in the red zone early in the game It was a real quick pass. Like Mayava got rid of the ball right away. It was just a flat pass to a running back, got tackled for a loss of 4 yards. Horrible play call. Now, Riley learned his lesson. He kept the ball in Mayava's hands on some read options, plays where the defense had to respect both Mayava as a runner and a passer. USC's fourth down calls, Riley's fourth down calls were great. USC converted several, and that was a big reason why this game went as smoothly as it did. It's also part of why the Trojans didn't punt, but they were not punting and converting fourth downs. It's a lot worse when you're not punting, but you're coughing it up on fourth downs. So Lincoln Riley's fourth down play calling, I'll give him a straight A for that. But that sequence of downs midway through the fourth where he threw on first and third down, and that play from the third and goal from the 3, terrible play call. So I can't give him straight A's, Jeff. I'll give him an A-, but there were still a few chinks in the armor. Can I complain? No, but he did fall short of a perfectly called game. Want to get that on the record for Jeff Rodriguez. All right. Now let's go to Danton Lynn. And, to an extent, we've already litigated this, but very indirectly. Is this a player issue in the secondary? Is it about the coaching? So let's just now put it on the table more directly about Danton Lynn, specifically in terms of, your evaluation of his defensive play calling and his overall management of the defense. Crash first, and then Ethan.
So, Matt, I think going back to what I said, I still want to, I'm still kind of want to get a bit of bigger sample size before I, lean more if it's, coaching or players, before I kind of rule a full verdict one way or the other. So I think definitely I've been impressed with his play calling for the most part, given the personnel. But I still think there are times where it could be better for sure. But overall, I have just been impressed with how he has been, handling this defense and have just, improved it significantly just from the time he came in back in December 2023. I think we can all agree on that. So overall, I've been impressed with him just overseeing the entire defense and as the defensive coordinator at USC. But I still think that he could definitely be better. I think he could still be a little bit better with his play calling. And I think going back to the issue of Kamari Ramsey, where he is on the field, whether he's in the nickel or somewhere else, I think that can also be something that because that's Lynn putting him there. So I think that definitely does fall into Lynn. So I think it's definitely still getting the guys in the right spots based on where they can best help the defense. But I'd also like to see his play calling with those guys in those right spots. So I'd like to see a couple more games before I fully rule verdict on. But I've still overall, though, been very impressed with him.
I think the biggest thing that Danton Lynn needs to fix is the penalties. And I've seen a couple of people talking about it in the chat, but that's the biggest issue on defense, in my opinion. I mean, I think play calling, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show, but I'll go back to it now. I really high on how Danton Lynn called this game. The safety blitz, you and I litigated that on Twitter, Matt, during the game. Loved that call. Loved the aggression. Just loved, seeing so many different defensive linemen, linebackers, even, Christian Pierce at the safety position get into the backfield and make it tough on Ryan Brown. And I think that, like I said, I think that this was Danton Lynn, using the strengths of the USC defense and trying to hide some of the weaknesses and doing the best with what he had. Whether if you want to blame Danton Lynn for not recruiting better defensive players in the secondary, you can, we can have that argument. I think you don't really know how these players are going to play until they play in games. First of all, there are players who are great practice players, and then all of a sudden, it's game day and they totally shrink, and vice versa. So I think that, give him a little bit of grace there. And I think also the 2 injuries that we talked about, really key injuries there. So play calling great. I think it's just a little bit of discipline that he is the one thing I'd call him out on that needs to be improved, because you can't be, getting face mask penalties in really key moments. You can't be getting, because, if Purdue is moving the ball consistently like they were all game long, and, you're in an opportunity where it's 3rd and long or, 4th down or any of those really key situations, you can't, if Ryan Brown makes a really great play to beat the secondary, which hasn't played that well, that's a little bit more understandable. But if you're just giving them a free 1st down because, some younger undisciplined player is, not controlling himself, then that's like a bigger issue in my opinion. So I think in terms of things that he can actively fix, because like I've said in previous weeks, he can't give these players in the secondary a year of experience in a week. So I think what needs to be fixed from his perspective is limiting the penalties, because that I think is an issue that in closer games is going to actually really, really burn us.
All right, folks. So we've been on the air for an hour 15. So actually, we've gone over a full hour. We have not come particularly close to the number of dollars on our super chat to give you a full second hour. So, like, if you think we've left some things on the table, well, hey, that's what a second hour is for, because we can't cover every single thing in the universe of USC football in just 1 hour. We've gone 75 minutes and we haven't covered absolutely every single thing. But we've hit on the position groups, we've hit on the coaches, but in the future, this is what a second hour can do if you contribute $150 in super chat. So we'll do this thing again, and we welcome Crash Collier to our show. He'll be with Ethan and myself on Tuesday, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, as we preview the Michigan State game. So every Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the West, we preview the next game. These Sunday shows are just for looking back at the game played 24 hours earlier on Saturday. So this has been our Purdue review show. So a reminder, vocfb.com/shop. Get one of those beautiful USC VOCFB USC camo hats to support us, but also, get yourself a nice snappy piece of USC merch that looks really good, because it looks really good on Ethan. Also, consider memberships. And, Crash, Ethan, and myself, we're going to be doing bonus cuts, bonus segments that only middle tier and upper tier members can get. We showed the screen grab earlier in this broadcast. Consider joining us at those middle or upper membership tiers to get more bang for your buck, more value, and more USC commentary and insight here at the Voice of College Football. So it's been a pleasure having Crash Collier aboard, a pleasure having Jeff Rodriguez with his $10 super chat, and it's a pleasure interacting with all of you. Great discussion in the chat, so much passion about USC football. And hey, UCLA and Notre Dame are a combined 0-5, another perfect weekend in the land of Troy. Things are pretty decent right now. We need USC to be tighten things up with the penalties, but all in all, a pretty good September so far. So for Crash Collier and Ethan Inman, this is Matt Zemek. Fight on. We will see you Tuesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific.